Welcome to Implicating the Real. Today's show is part 2 of the conversation began in the previous episode. Let's get right into it. Hope you enjoy.
I had a funny one on 99 I just wanted to ask you guys about too. Okay, here you go. At certain times during the night, the negative ions in the air are much stronger or numerous than in the daytime, for example, and activity during this time, particularly a walk or outside activity, would be highly beneficial from a health standpoint.
Thank you so much for pulling that up, because I was looking for that.
Haha, the night ions.
Right? I
Doesn't that seem like scientifically verifiable? I don't know much about ions.
Seth has said that our instruments are not capable of picking up what he's talking about yet.
Yeah.
Not there yet.
I'm just not well versed in ions.
What did you want to say about it, though?
Oh, I found out recently that it's... Well, I'm just going to read this off of the HindustanTimes.com. Known as Shatapavali, I'm sorry if I'm butchering that, or 100 Steps, the age-old Indian custom encourages one to take a stroll post-meal for enjoying a range of benefits, be it weight loss, preventing blood sugar spikes, managing hypertension, or preventing acidity and bloating. I know this is something that a lot of Indian families do together. They'll walk at like 9 p.m. at night after their meal for health reasons. I only found out about this like a year ago, and I was like, wow, that's such a good idea.
That sounds very pleasant.
Yeah.
It does. It feels like it's relaxing, and they take the kids along too. It's like family bonding time.
Yeah.
But maybe they're onto something with the negative ions. And
I mean, like, people talk about the night feel or like the night air, right? Like, there's this whole like thing of like the nighttime just like is like experientially like different, you know?
Did you just read that one paragraph?
Just the one paragraph.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the sentence before. For many reasons, physical activity at night has a different effect upon the body than physical activity during the day, and ideally both effects are necessary. I mean, again, like I don't know how or why, or he doesn't really go into detail, but it doesn't sound that outrageous that could be true to me. And he's basically saying, like, here's another positive effect of this sleep schedule, that it gives you opportunity to both. He also mentions like eating at night and exercising at night. So interesting.
I will say that since living here, I've noticed that deer and rabbits are pretty active at night when it's like almost, when it would normally be pitch black if it were not for our lighting. I really think it's creepy because you're driving, you're walking, there's just like deer there.
Yeah.
But I mean, they must be doing that for some reason. You would think that they would just get all their nutrients during the day.
If they were wearing headlamps, their neighbors would be really...
Deers with headlamps running around, pillaging Minneapolis streets.
But you'd see them from afar.
Well, I think like deer for sure, and a lot of other animals are on sort of like a sleeping twice a day schedule where they're awake in like the dawn and also the dusk time, and usually they like rest during the midday and they rest in the middle of the night is like my understanding.
Probably to avoid the heat and
The extreme temperatures.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, also, you know, negative ions. It's good for the deer too.
That reminds me of how, like, a lot of people will say they're not morning people, and some of those people will say they get their best work done at night at like 3 a.m., even if they follow the traditional sleep schedule, and at that hour they've been up for like a long time. They've been up since 9 a.m. They'll still say, like, I do my best work at night. And I don't really think it's necessarily that they are not being disturbed by anyone, because often these people, at least the ones I know anecdotally, are folks that work from home and are already alone most of the day anyway, with no obligation to respond to anyone. I just find it interesting because, like, yeah, they can get into the zone at 3 a.m., but why not?
Where my mind goes when you say that is, and I think Seth mentions this somewhere too, just like something I say like 10 times every podcast. But like at night when so many other people in the immediate area are sleeping, then you have more, your kind of like conscious focus has more flexibility. So depending on the kind of work they're doing too, I think especially, like I think of it in terms of like creative work, like writing.
Yeah.
I tend to prefer, you know, times where other people are sleeping regardless of like more immediate distractions.
Is it because they're sleeping so they're not projecting thoughts to you?
Yeah. I want to say Seth gets into this in more than one place. It should be maybe worth trying to find out. But like it's more or less, yeah, like the dark hemisphere of the world has a different, it's not so much the people that are sleeping, but it's the not being awake. Like being awake kind of attunes you to this level of consciousness. And like, especially in creative work, I think you're trying to like reach past that to bring new things into it. And so there is a little bit more of like collective freedom or something.
They're not eating up all the bandwidth.
They're just not dragging you down to like 92.3 when you want to be at 96.7.
Right, yeah. Well, I know like didn't Seth talk about like a lot of the like reality creating energy is like, God, what was it? Was it like radio signals or some weird thing like that? It was just like radiation, right?
It's just electromagnetic. I think.
Electromagnetic.
Yeah. He talks about that with like sleeping north-south and stuff, that you're aligned with the magnetic fields and stuff like that.
And like, you know, in terms of radio waves, like radio waves can travel much better at night because there's no interference from solar radiation. So maybe there's something to that.
Wow.
Yeah, I guess I'd heard that before and I never really put it together. Like my parents' generation would say things like, yeah, we used to, at night on the AM station, we could get Texas something.
Yeah, you can get radio signals from across the ocean at night.
Interesting.
Yeah, just wanted to negative ions. Thought that was funny.
On page 100,
I loved page 100.
I'm kind of going to read a little of the top and a little of the bottom, so if there's more in there after this, you'll have to get into it. Some of the divisions between different portions of the self, therefore, are not basically necessary, but are the result of custom and convenience. And then I'm going down to the bottom. I bring up these matters here because such changes in habitual patterns would definitely result in greater understanding of the nature of the self. I feel like this is kind of the main reason he's getting into this, despite all the other benefits. The inner dreaming portions of the personality seem strange to you, not only because of a basic difference of focus, but because you clearly devote opposite portions of a 24-hour cycle to these areas of the self. You separate them as much as possible. In doing so, you divide your intuitive, creative, and psychic abilities quite neatly from your physical, manipulative, objective abilities. And I think that's just plain to see. Like, I kind of touched on that when I was doing the extreme examples for like sleeping for 4 months. But, you know, we go much of our lives like not giving too much consideration to whatever conscious activity is happening, you know, in that dark third of our lives, which is really strange when you think about it.
Yeah.
I think maybe we brought it up before, that show Severance. Have you guys seen that?
Mm-mm.
The premise of the show is that like it's this new experimental procedure that you can do where you can sever the part of your mind from your normal waking life from your work life.
Oh.
So you still go to work normally, but those two parts of your mind are totally separate. So like part of you experiences like you never work, and the other part of you feels like you're always at work, literally. Like the day ends, your work day ends, and then it begins again the next day. And it's pretty bananas. But it's kind of what we're doing with our sleep, I feel like.
No, this seems like a very good cultural critique.
Yeah. And
like,
so like,
who go work on like, you know, jet fighters that are going to drop bombs on people or whatever, and then they go home and they're like, blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, I don't think about the implications of the things that I do while I'm working.
yeah, we like silo parts of ourselves off. And what's interesting in the show, it's been a while since I've seen it. Maybe there's a second season though now or soon. But, you know, because of that extreme separation, one part wants to communicate with the other, and they have to go to more extremes to try to like get their attention. And I can see this probably does happen to some extent with our like dreaming, our dreaming symbols. And, you know, like the fact that we're sitting here like reading stuff like this, I know there's an effort on the part of our conscious selves to try to reach that dreaming consciousness too and build a bridge. And I think that's one of Seth's main kind of pushes, is that we need to like build this bridge between these different parts of ourselves that are artificially separated.
Right, yeah, we need to like become more integrated.
Yeah. I mean, even if you don't buy into all of this, you can see how there's probably little downside in being more integrated understanding for this part of our consciousness to have a better understanding of that part and vice versa.
I agree. I like the part in the middle of this page that I think you skipped. Can I read it?
Yeah.
All right. It says, in earlier periods of time, even though there was no electric lights, for example, sleep was not long and continuous at night, for sleeping quarters were not as secure. The caveman, for example, while sleeping, was left on alert for predators. The mysterious aspects of the natural night and outside surroundings kept him particularly alert. He awakened often and surveyed the nearby land and his own place of shelter. He did not sleep in long blocks as you do. His sleeping periods were instead for 2 or 3 hours, stretched through the night time from dusk to dawn, but alternated by periods of high wakefulness and alert activity. He also crept out to seek food when he hoped his predators were sleeping. This resulted in a mobility of consciousness that indeed ensured his physical survival, and those intuitions that appeared to him in the dream state were remembered and taken advantage of in the waking state. I thought that was such a cool idea because, like, I think that is, like, a thing that does result from, like, separating this stuff out is, like, in cultures where people, like, have more of, like, an alternation between, like, waking and sleeping, it's noted that, like, they do more, like, thinking and interpreting about, like, their dreams, like, in those periods of time, you know? Like, even when we were talking about, like, the 2 different sleep cycles and, like, the little period of time in between, it's like during that time, a lot of what people choose to do is, like, think about the dream that they just had and, like, try to, like, imagine stuff with it, you know, and, like, interpret it and, like, apply it to their life, you know? And there's, like, this conscious, wakeful attention to the dream world that you can have if you're living in this, you know, more sleep integrated sort of lifestyle. Like, there's a benefit in, like, having more of, like, a mythological sort of view of your own, like, psychological experiences, you know?
Yeah, it's really cool. One thing I think about, you know, just by having 2 sleep periods during the day, yeah, like you're saying, not only am I doubling those times where I'm, like, waking and coming out and, like, falling asleep, those kind of, like, twilight periods, which is cool to be more aware of those and those transitions. And I think that does translate to, like, flexibility of consciousness, but also, like, your hard idea of what a day is changes because, like, now you're waking up twice, like, and you're used to, like, oh, the day begins when I wake up. And to some extent, like, I had, you know, these hard definitions shattered just by working the overnight shift because, like, it's always 2 days, 2 different dates whenever I work. You know, it starts on one day and ends on the other. Takes some getting used to, but I just think, like, softening our definitions of, like, what a day is. Like, you can go to sleep in the afternoon, wake up again, and take whatever benefits there are from saying, like, oh, it's a new day. You can do that even though it's technically the same day.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting that you mentioned that. I had completely forgotten, but when I first started the Seth sleep schedule, after my nap, it would feel like literally an entire day off between my work days. So I'd wake up, I'd roll out of bed right before my, like, 8 a.m. meeting because
Yeah.
I work from home. So I would wake up, work until, like, 4-ish, and then take my nap for 2 hours. And then when I wake up, all that until bedtime is leisure time for me. I don't have any responsibility except to cook dinner. So it almost felt like a mini weekend between each day. And sometimes I'd wake up from my nap and be like, oh, shoot, I have to go to work. And I'd be like, oh, no, I already worked today. Okay, great. I just get to, like, play video games and hang out until, like, 4 a.m. and then go to sleep again. It was really awesome. Like, that was one of the best parts of the Seth sleep schedule, is feeling like I had to work only every other day.
I love that. Oh, I already worked today.
Yeah.
Silly me.
I know.
I kind of self-imposed, like, almost the opposite because I chose the profession I'm in because it gives me a lot of free time to write. So that is, in some ways, consider my leisure time. And I'm, like, at times in the past, I've been so much more, like, disciplined about getting work done. So in that free part of the day, which you're, like, playing video games and enjoying yourself, like, I'm doing all these, like, chores and, like, workouts and stuff and, like, you know, yard work or whatever. And then I'm thinking to myself, like, I can't wait till I get to work so I can sit down and have a cup of tea. But it's the same thing. It's totally self-imposed, but it's a privilege for me to say, like, I can't wait to get to work because not many people say that.
Yeah.
Well, I imagine, like, especially with, like, your situation, being able to do all those other things with the other half of your day probably does help keep you sane. Because, like, a lot of people I've met that do work, like, night shift jobs, like, that's part of the difficulty, right? Is,
Yeah.
like, keeping some normalcy to, like, the rest of their life.
Yeah. And yeah, don't get me wrong. I make myself do those things, but there's plenty of psychological benefit happening for me, like just getting things done and just being healthy and exercising.
Yeah.
But it's cool just to have the feeling, yeah, like I don't have to do anything today, even if it's just like a little partial day.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of nap pretty frequently, more than a normal person, don't you?
I just like sleeping. I like to sleep a lot. Yeah. I just like take a couple hour naps sometimes just because I feel like it.
Do you think this is going to change the way you approach it at all or experiment with anything?
Probably just nap more.
I love that.
I don't know. Yeah, I already like, if I let myself sleep, I'll sleep like 10, 11 hours, in a night, and then I'll wake up and I'll be like, I want to nap still. So I think I just really like being asleep.
I have noticed that though, like with like what Seth would say is sleeping too long is like, I'll still want a nap after that because like he's kind of implying that it's not efficient. So like you end up feeling more groggy again.
Like I was saying though, I'm going to end up getting the summer off. So maybe I'll actually do like a long-term like trial run of the Seth sleep schedule once I have some free time.
I think if I didn't have to work, my ideal would be to stay up till like 12 or 1, wake up at like 5 or 6, and then have like a 2-hour nap maybe at like 1 p.m. or something.
Yeah, I feel like it would be cool to like stay up late at night and then wake up really early. Have like a morning, like a short little like morning period, and then like sleep before noon, and then like wake up at like noon and then just have like a day,
And he touched on like the time before dawn is a nice period of peak, could be potentially peak wakefulness, and there's time in the afternoon that can be sluggish. So that actually fits right in.
Yeah, I thought that was so interesting how much he like focused on like peak wakefulness.
Whenever he says those kinds of things, I was like, please tell us more, explain why.
Right?
How.
Just throwing us scraps over here, making us figure it out.
Because I guess the overall implication that everything is in cycles and seasons. And I think from his point of view, it can be super complex. Like when Seth comments on like astrology, the way I remember, he more or less says that there's truth in it, but that's so complex that like...
Did he really say that?
I want to say like something like there's truth into like the positions of the planets and certain times, but like it's so complex that you really don't have the ability to be like an astrologer that can like factor in everything that you need to factor.
Yeah.
But he says the people that are capable of doing it have just general like psychic abilities, kind of like the mechanic healer, that they're just kind of like channeling it through this different profession.
They're just like reading the vibes. They're not actually doing the calculation.
They're just like a general psychic, and they're just using that sort of medium to follow their intuitions. It's kind of like an acceptable mediumship.
I mean, I think from my experience of people who do that stuff, that seems kind of right, where it's sort of like they have very intuitive and very like interesting insights on people, and then they just like after the fact be like, oh, and it's because of these star things, and you're like, the real thing I'm interested in about you is that you're able to like pinpoint these like personality characteristics, not so much like your reason for doing it,
Yeah.
Can I read something?
Yeah, please.
This is from Unknown Reality, Volume 2. He says, the very positions of the planets and the stars are effects of the senses, perceptions that would have no meaning were it not for your own kind of consciousness. Those perceptions, then, cannot cause you to behave in any given way because of conditions that have no meaning outside of your own consciousness. With physical perception, the picture all fits, of course. You realize that someone, some interested observer, viewing the Earth from another planet in another galaxy would be seeing what you think of as Earth's past. But as I pointed out, he might also be seeing Earth's future, according to his viewpoint. This would in no way alter your reality. The positions of the stars and planets, however, and your time scheme cannot be depended upon to give an indication of causal effects. The personality simply exists in greater terms. I took that to mean that astrology was bunk.
I'm open to, like, I feel like there's some room for interpretation just going by just what you said there. But like what I was thinking of, like we're talking a lot of like bodily and chemical stuff, and our materialistic point of view wants to see that as the primary cause, and that's why we use drugs to treat our maladies. But they're correlative, they're part of the same one thing. Instead of separating these into these dimensions of like physical, psychological, they're just one thing, and they're both the same thing. And or if anything, it's the conscious psychological that is primary. And that's kind of what I was getting with that like
I see.
did he kind of say that like the planetary positions can be effects?
No, that the positions of the planets are effects of the senses.
Effects of the senses. So that
So you're the one who's making them.
that's what I'm thinking, is like in the way that we're like constantly choosing our reality, changing probabilities, that like even the position of the planets can be part of the effects of what we're choosing.
Does that also mean that like the orbital patterns and trajectories are all bunk? Like if we shot a satellite out to go look at Jupiter, it would crash into Jupiter only if everyone wanted it to crash into Jupiter. But if we didn't want it to, then Jupiter would be just on the opposite side of its orbital path. Like, is that what we're saying?
I don't know, because there was that one time where he said that Jane bumped into the wall or a piece of furniture because she forgot to create it until the moment before she bumped into it. She didn't make it in the right place. Like she shifted it a little or something like that.
But I think the implication is that like because we are attuned to this reality, that we almost always default at the last second to bumping our shin. Like it's never the situation where we just like walk through the coffee table and don't even notice that we did.
Because if somebody noticed they did, they wouldn't have walked through it.
So it's like there's a part of yourself that's like grounded in this reality so much that it's going to be like, yeah, I know you weren't noticing that, but it's still there. Here's a bump on your shin. Remind you.
I feel like those are almost the same thing.
What you said reminds me of those people who like start driving for 2 hours and they completely zone out and they're like, what? I'm here. I have no memory of what happened, and they're not on drugs or anything like that.
With like everyone's just like, hey, I thought that planet was over there. Like now it's over. Like what's going on? Is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about like the specific phenomenon of people like doing a thing completely unconsciously and then forgetting that they drove. It's usually, the example is almost always like driving a long distance. But what you're talking about, I feel like it's more like Mandela effect, where people are like, wait a minute, didn't that used to be that way? I swear I remember it that way and it wasn't.
Right.
I mean, it's just as wild as we've talked about a little bit about like changing your past, and that's where the Mandela's effect has come up too. But like, I think the explanation is that you're choosing a probability where everyone else made the same choice. They're also choosing a past where the planet being moved from there to there is continuous because they've chosen a past that lines up with it. We're in this weird position where like we have this need for continuity of time. And so when we switch to a different probability, not only are we switching to a different past where that planetary move would make sense because according to that past, it was always moving to where it is, right?
Right.
We're choosing that reality with all the other probable people who also chose that reality with that past.
Yeah, and it's not a function of distance. It's just a function of like that's how everything works, right? Because like that's the one interesting thing about planets, right? Is that they're like really far away. Because otherwise the mechanics should work the same theoretically with stuff that's in this room. Like we should be able to just like chuck something at the wall and like have it hit like, like a dartboard or something. And it's like, if it's on the trajectory to hit the dartboard, but then we all go like, oh, it's not going to hit. Then it goes and it like moves over, would be the same thing as what I'm talking about,
Yeah. And honestly, where my mind goes and where it gets really interesting, I think, is sports, right? Where you have like this high profile sports championship game or something, and there's like millions of people invested in this ball going right here versus right here. And like, what sort of probabilities are we choosing? What sort of like, if if that quote is to be taken the way that I was kind of going with it, that like the planet is moving as an effect of our choices, then that's definitely happening in like a live play, such as a sports game.
Well, that's why people do so many magical rituals to try to get their team to win.
It's
Do
interesting.
you really do that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they get
huge,
very
yeah.
superstitious. Yeah, some people like won't like, wash their shirt if you're on a winning streak or something, or worse, probably.
They'll go do like a big like chant that they do every single time, or like, yeah, all sorts of different rituals. People do tons of stuff. And then after they do win, they, climb telephone poles and eat horse crap.
That's Philadelphia specifically, but
Philadelphia is full of magicians, I'm telling you.
the fact that the city had to like grace the telephone poles so that their sports fans wouldn't climb them, it's just saying something.
You're just tempting the universe at that point. You're like, do you want the coolest result to happen? Because if you do, our team needs to win.
I mean, that is tempting. Is like, it's true, right? Like, how many people wouldn't have even thought of climbing the pole, but they read in the paper that, the city is greasing them, therefore they're going to try it, right?
I'm just pointing out to Minnesota sports fans is like, you guys need to get more unhinged so that when you win, cool stuff happens. Because then the rest of us will want you to win.
Right.
That's why you always get like just up to the point, but then you don't do it. Because the universe is like, yes, we'll have a nice calm night if Minnesota wins.
We'll see.
Can I read one more thing that
Yeah,
I just forgot to search in our dictation for straight up astrology? This is also out of Unknown Reality Volume 2. Seth says when astrology works, it works because the astrologer is using his or her creative and psychic abilities and then projecting that knowledge into a pattern that is of itself too small to contain it. The chart then simply becomes an aid.
I think that's what I was saying with like the mechanic healing thing. Yeah.
Right.
They're just reading the vibes.
Yeah. So much of this chapter is just all the good things that are going to happen if you sleep the right way.
Yeah, the functions of hormones and chemicals and of adrenal processes in particular would function with far greater effectiveness were these alternating periods of activeness I had mentioned. I like the end of 102 was very funny, where Seth just like really strongly demands that Jane and Rob start sleeping like this.
Do you got a quote?
I'll just read a little bit. Changing the sleep patterns would automatically change the eating. No, we don't want to do that. Your enjoyment of nature would also increase, for as a rule, you are largely unacquainted with the nighttime. You could take much better advantage of the intuitional knowledge that occurs in the dream state, and the cycle of your moods would not swing so definitely as it often does. You would feel much safer and more secure in all areas of existence. The problems of senility would also be reduced, for stimuli would not be minimized for so long a time, and consciousness with a greater flexibility would know more of its own sense of joy. You may take a break, and then in parentheses, suddenly louder. And if you do not try this, how can you expect others to?
That's funny.
And then Rob's like, I don't know.
I love that.
Yeah, your own periods of creative work would also be more effective and efficient if you followed the advice given here. And then Rob says, we'll see what we can do.
I feel like that last sentence is the way to get those two particular.
Yeah, just like, all right, Rob, you want to be better at your artistic pursuits? Like, come on, man.
There was one more thing I wanted to say.
Yeah.
We read this before. He did say that more frequent, briefer sleep periods would lead to the more economical use of energy and a more effective use of nutrients. And you were talking about how different countries don't sleep the way we do. America is probably one of the countries that is the most obese.
True.
I wonder if there is a link. I know that it's obviously not the only thing, but I do wonder if this contributes somewhat.
Yeah, I could see it, right?
Well, yeah, and especially too if we're saying that, and this goes along with my experience, but if you sleep 10 hours, you wake up feeling groggy than if you like got out a little sooner in one of your sleep cycles. And if you're groggy, or like the state you're talking about before you found this, like you're just more sedentary. Like, the things that I'd like to do with my free time are like read and write. And if I don't have a high level of alertness, then I just choose to like sit down and watch something, and then you're sedentary, and then it's its own vicious cycle, right? Like the more out of shape you are, the less likely you are to exercise, the more likely you are to eat bad, and it's just I think that's a good point.
Oh yeah. I mean, even in terms of just people say you're not supposed to like eat right before you go to sleep or whatever because your body uses the food weird. I guess Seth disagrees with that because Seth talks about like, yeah, you should get up in the middle of the night and have something to eat, you know?
He's not saying like a huge rack of ribs and like a heavy cake though.
Right.
It's probably meaning like, I don't know, some nuts and some fruit or something.
Just have a little snack so that you don't, because one thing, isn't that a thing that Seth says is that like people are starving themselves in their sleep? Like you don't get enough food to eat through to like bide you over through the night.
I do think that's why a lot of people wake up from like a 10-hour sleep session tired, because your blood sugar is probably pretty low. You're also like super dehydrated just from...
That's a big one, honestly, from just colloquial experience. I know so many people who are so dehydrated all the time. It's wild to me.
It is. I like to keep like a glass of water by my table, so when I get up, I just chug it.
It's the night water. It has the negative ions in it.
I didn't even think of that. Yeah. Basically, the only time I ever get a headache is when I'm dehydrated. It's like that's the first thing I think when I get a headache. Like, oh, I need to drink some water.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if you were to stay awake for 10 hours and not drink anything, you would feel like crap.
Yeah,
So it's really not a surprise that you go to sleep for 10 hours, don't eat anything, and you wake up and you're like, why do I feel so bad? I'm just going to go back to sleep.
Yeah. Well, and then there's the thing too, just like the side effect of like, we were talking at the beginning about how like stressed out people are with like this like current like modern style of living. And it's like one of the things people run to try to like, you know, get the dopamine hit, right? Is like eat a bunch of food that they don't need to eat. And it's like even just like sleeping better to like help your mental health might help a lot of people just not overeat because they don't need to use it as like a way of, you know, dealing with the rest of their stress, you know?
Yeah. This idea, and Seth says it a lot, the vicious cycle, it works both ways. Like every little benefit can be like an exponential step in the positive direction and vice versa. Because I think like when I'm groggy too, like, yeah, I'm just like, oh, this will make me feel better. And yeah, it's usually like some sugary food or something or whatever. And yeah, it's so much of our culture just, you know, just goes down that direction and never turns back.
Yeah, you just got to keep hitting the button.
More is better. And that's partly why like some of us think like we just should just sleep as long as we can if we have the time. More is better.
Hey, I'm trying to go live in the dream world. That sounds fun. Send me there all day.
I had a buddy that was his cooking style. More is better. So just like out of ton of every spice, and just everything he made just ended up being like brown. You know, like you just like mixing all the paints together.
I was reading something yesterday that said like back in the medieval times, I think, spices are a sign of wealth. So when nobles would have their friends over to impress them, they would just dump a ton of spices on there to the point where the food is almost not edible. Like you just have to like suffer through it.
And you're eating it and you're like, this amount of pepper that I'm about to eat is like worth like an entire like town's worth of like peasant houses. Like I can't say no.
Yeah, there's those people that are just like so impressed by wealth that they're just like sweating or something while they're eating it, but they're just like, this is great.
This is great. Yeah. Did you have stuff on 102, 103?
Not really.
Michael, you were talking earlier about how like Seth is saying that right now we really silo the waking state and the sleeping state, and it made me think of how today, like 2020 times, we try not to silo everything like that. Like nothing exists in a vacuum. We understand that almost everything we do depends on the rest of what we do. Like people talk about work-life balance. We know now that what the food you eat can impact like your skin. You know, people will say things like, "Oh, I had a pizza, so like I'm going to break out." And people obviously know that you can't just like nutrition and the physical like exercise and health are related. You can't just like eat a full meal and then expect to do vigorous exercise afterwards. We don't live separately like that. But for sleep and for waking, we do that. And I think that society is trending more towards viewing health including physical and mental health more holistically as like a...
I think so. I think we're in the process of coming out of like just the black and white thinking in general.
Yeah. I think it's because we're finding out more and more that like everything is interrelated. Like they're starting to see that like, gut health has a lot of impact on everything, including mental health.
Yeah, I listened to a podcast once calling it like the second brain.
Yeah.
Like, wow, that is just a bizarre thing to hear. Like if you don't understand what they're getting at.
Yeah.
And to think like, yeah, it's full of all these other separate entities,
Yeah.
seemingly separate entities.
Oh, yeah. You are an ecology, right?
Yeah.
Who's the parasite, you or your gut bacteria?
I mean, we've talked about that in this podcast a lot with just like, what does it mean to be an identity? What's the self? Where are the divisions? Where does it end?
Yeah. That sort of connects with what I was going to, if I can find it. Oh, yeah. Now I'm giving all this material here because it will help you understand and use your present abilities. You are asking too much of normal waking consciousness, smoothing out the valleys and peaks of its activity, demanding in some cases that it go full blast ahead when it is actually at a minimal period, denying yourself the great mobility of consciousness that is possible. I just love that phrase, like the mobility of consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the idea that like you as a conscious entity have all of these other like sort of modes of being in, and that like the correct way to live maybe is to embrace that there is this mobility that is always at play, where you can sort of identify where you're at and like how you're trending and be like, what is appropriate for me at this moment, you know?
Yeah, this helped me a lot to get like out of that mode of like forcing myself, like, oh, this is the time I set aside to write. I have to force myself to write even if I am not mentally very capable right now, you know? It's just like you become more fluid. You find you can do something else that you need to do in that period. Then all of a sudden you're, you know, the season of your day changes and suddenly you feel like, oh, yeah. And then you think of an idea and you sit down and it just works out if you just kind of like open your belief system to the, you know, things just happening in a different way.
Yeah, I feel like if you get good enough at it, you can still get all of the things you wanted to do done. You can just be like more joyful maybe while you're doing all of them.
But you just have to set aside a little bit of what you've accepted as, you know, just purely logical. And it's often connected to time, I think, for us. Like we're just so time oriented, probably especially at this part of our, you know, evolution.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're the people of the clock, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we track things by minutes, not hours.
Yeah.
He covers a lot of what you guys were just talking about in the magical approach, how you should approach work in a much more open-minded, free manner, try to like do it joyfully and spontaneously.
Yeah.
I think he literally told either Robert or Jane at one point that you cannot just sit down at the table and tell your creative mind, okay, it's time to write, so write.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work then.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is part of I feel like our society is moving towards this too, but like you're doing more listening to your state of mind and your body than you are dictating it. And there's a give and take there, right? Like I always think of the horse and the rider analogy.
Right, because discipline is still required,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it's still a character benefit to be disciplined.
I think some of the personal session books go even deeper into what he's talking about there in that book. I'll have to pull up some quotes sometime. I'm also on 104. I got some highlighted. This extended period given to waking consciousness without rest periods builds up chemicals in the blood that are discharged in sleep. But in the meantime, they make the body sluggish and retard conscious concentration. The long sleep period to which you are accustomed then does become necessary. A vicious circle is then formed. This forces overstimulation during the night, increasing the body's work, making it perform continuously over an extended time physical purifications that ideally would be taken care of in briefer periods of rest. The ego feels threatened by the extended leave of absence it must take, becomes wary of sleep, and sets up barriers against the dream state. Many of these are highly artificial. A seeming duality is the result of a mistrust on one part of the self toward the other.
That reminds me of what you said earlier about how they found in a study that 7 hours is the ideal time. And maybe that's just because if you're awake for the other, like 17 hours, you're building up all that crap in the blood. So now the body needs to sleep 7 hours to get all that stuff out. Because he did say in this chapter, 6 to 8 hours can become disadvantageous. I don't even sleep more than 6 hours anymore. And I think every sleep doctor I go to today would disagree with what I'm doing given my sleep study results in the past. But like, I have more energy than I ever have.
That's a really good point. Because, like we're talking about these scientific studies and stuff, and within the vicious circle, as he calls it, like if you don't break that, you're studying results within that.
Right. No, yeah. It reminded me of a different study I had read that they did the thing where they like keep people in like a dark environment for like an extended period of time where there's like no light to sort of like cue their sleep cycle. And at first the people would sleep like 11, 12 hours straight. But like what they noticed when they were doing the study is like eventually they'd get away from that. And their reason for why they thought people were doing that was sort of like catching up on like this lack of sleep that they had up until this point, where they had to like maybe clear out like toxins or whatever, or like, but then after being in that environment for a little while, they end up doing like shorter bursts of time that were like broken up,
Interesting.
And I like read that, like I read a lot of that stuff like before I started reading this chapter. So when I got to this part, I was like, yo, that is actually what happened when they like studied it. It was like very impressive. Like
that's cool.
Yeah.
Do you know like how long they were deprived of the normal daylight?
I have to look. I don't remember how long they were in that environment, but I know it was like several days, right? Because it was like day after day of like in it. So
I kind of had that when I was working on the pipeline back in the day. I had a trailer that I made like almost completely soundproof, but it was completely lightproof. And like I could just, I moved to Missoula. This all sounds very weird, but these are just the bullet points to become a smoke jumper. And like I was applying for jobs and just had all this free time. And I kind of had my own version of that where I would stay up for like 20 hours and then I would sleep for like 12 hours. And like my day cycle just got super long, kind of the opposite of what this is. But like, I don't think I wasn't like being scientific about it, nor was I trying to like follow a certain trend or just listen to my body either. So,
yeah. Well, and like, there is that thing, right, where like, if you're sleeping for like really, really long periods of time, sometimes it ends up actually just being like smaller ones. And then you have like a semi-conscious state in between that's like not really sleep, but not really being awake.
Yeah. I just thought that was interesting that like there's a part of yourself that notices that like your habits are forcing you to, maybe that's not what's happening here. Like there's a part of yourself that notices like the negative things that your conscious mind is forcing you to do, and maybe like a mistrust develops.
Oh, you're talking about the part where there's like the barriers against like dreams and...
Yeah, it's just like how little things like, and it is all along the lines of that vicious cycle again, that just one thing starts and then one part of yourself. And it's kind of like the Severance thing, like instead of like this constructive communication that could just happen easily if it was allowed, there's just like these two separate parts of your consciousness become enemies because they're not listening to me, they're doing this despite me, and then there's trust and fear, and that just like it just cements this division, this artificial division.
Yeah. I wonder. I feel like there is sort of that interplay, from my experience at least, between like dreaming and like wakefulness, where it's like to get the most out of like the dream state, it almost requires that you do work while you're awake, And it's like that sort of like intentional process like that you do consciously then like translates into like more deep sort of work like unconsciously, I guess. And it's like if you're in this kind of like state of, rushing, and then you're like tired all the time and you're like sleeping really deep, like you might just be in like a lifestyle where like you're not taking the time to like do that during the day. I don't know.
Yeah. It makes me think of elsewhere where Seth says like if you have like a creative problem, you can just suggest that it gets solved by your dreaming self while you sleep.
Yeah.
That would have been cool to just slip a little nugget of that into this chapter too. He does say on the next page, a clear, uncluttered, bright, and powerful consciousness needs frequent rest periods if its efficiency is to be maintained and if it is to correctly interpret reality. I just like that, we've already touched on how these scientific experiments can be lost in this context of a vicious cycle. And this is just pointing to the broader point, just like it has all these little benefits, these health benefits. But to me, like, nothing is more important than interpreting reality correctly.
Of course.
Because that's going to help you in every way possible.
That reminds me, I wanted to read a quote from earlier in the chapter where he talks about creativity. He says, your sense of time would also be less rigorous and rigid. Creative abilities would be quickened, and the great problem of insomnia that exists for many people would be largely conquered. But essentially, he does say that you would become more creative on this sleep schedule. And he said elsewhere in another book, I don't remember what book this was. Must have been an early one because it's session 115. He says many concepts, huge advancements, and practical inventions simply wait in abeyance in the world of dreams until some man accepts them as possibilities within his frame of reality.
Yeah. That reminds me of him saying to Jane and Rob, like, this book is finished in framework 2, which is his name for where all the probabilities are like simultaneous in there. And the creative person reaches into that framework to find things, but also your sleeping consciousness has much more access to that than our waking one does.
Yeah. I have some examples here to share of art that was created in a dream. This is obviously not going to be a comprehensive list because I think we discussed this last time. So many musical artists will say that an idea for a song came to them in their head. They just sat down and wrote for 20 minutes and it becomes one of their greatest hits. So Yesterday by Paul McCartney, Number 9 Dream by John Lennon, Billy Joel's River of Dreams, Jimi Hendrix's Purple Haze, and other examples include Johnny Cash, The Police, Todd Rundgren, a lot of symphonies also from like classical composers. You have famous authors. So Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson, E.B. White's Stuart Little, Stephanie Meyer's Twilight, Stephen King's Misery. I've also heard that Harry Potter also came to J.K. Rowling in a dream, but I'd have to fact check that.
I believe that.
I'd almost say that it's probably more likely the default than not. Like, even if you don't realize it, even if you think you just thought of it, it could be like something you were like primed for in your dream.
Yep. And then for examples of inventions, apparently the idea behind Google searching came to Larry Page in a dream. Chemical transmission of nerve impulses came to Otto Lowy in a dream. Periodic table of elements came to Dmitri Mendeleev in a dream.
That's
wild. Yeah, double helix structure of DNA, the image James Watson saw in a dream. And then the modern sewing machine, Elias Howe was having trouble figuring out how would we thread the needle properly so it can go like both ways. And then he had a dream about that, and he woke up and he was like, I have it. Isn't that cool?
Crazy.
And that's obviously not a comprehensive list, because these are the people who like remember that it came from a dream. Again, what Michael said, a lot of people won't remember that it came from a dream.
It makes me want to, be a little more gung-ho about the suggestion of like,
Big time.
I will solve this issue or I will figure out this creative problem in my dream tonight while I sleep.
I use that a lot.
Really?
Anytime I have any dilemma that I'm like, okay, I've already exhausted trying to approach this from a logical perspective, I'm just going to leave it up to like my greater awareness to just pick a path for me and then feed me the intuition I need to figure out what the best route is. Mm-hmm. And I taught Seth fans to do this too, and they've also had good luck with it.
Yeah, it's really cool. Let's see where we're at. Learning processes are definitely hampered through your present habits, for there are certain periods when consciousness is attuned to learning, and yet you try to force learning during unrecognized minimal periods. Creative and psychic abilities are thrust into the background simply because of this artificial division. Dualities result that affect all of your activities. I guess I just highlighted that because he is like, he's moving beyond just like these physical benefits and getting to more of the like the creative and psychic ones that I feel are interesting.
That was one of the things that I was like a little bit like disappointed by, like towards the end here. Because like there was that one part where he's talking about like mobility of consciousness. And I was like, yeah, he's going to talk about how it's like important to like embrace like all these different like peaks and valleys. And then he's like, yeah, but the peaks are like, that's where it's at. Like you want to maximize the number of peaks that you have, you know?
Yeah. Well, And at first it took me a little thinking about like why he's tying the second part that we're coming up on to what we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But he's,
Well, I think that might be part of, at the top, it talks about how he's not really following his outline anymore.
right.
So I wonder if Jane and Rob just didn't know where to put that section.
But that's also true. But I think there is a way it ties together, and maybe we should just save that. You guys had any more that you want to add?
Concluding thoughts about the sleep.
In summation, yeah. Seth's sleep schedule has many benefits.
I guess I
According
would
to
just
Seth.
say approach it with an open mind.
Yeah.
That vicious circle quote that you read, I think, or whichever one included his mention of like the mistrust working against you. I found that when I put complete trust in the sleep schedule and I stopped thinking, okay, I need 8 hours and 90-minute REM cycles and all that crap, I was able to just go to sleep at 4 a.m. on a work day, on a work night, and get up at 8 feeling great.
Yeah.
It didn't matter when I went to sleep anymore. And if I wanted to stay up until 5 with REMs, I could. And I wake up at in 3 hours feeling refreshed as heck.
Yeah.
Because I put all my faith in that. I just stopped believing it. Because normally when people do that, they go to sleep feeling guilty. They go to sleep expecting to wake up feeling like crap, and so they do.
Yeah.
But if you just trust that your body can refresh itself and you don't go to sleep with negative expectations, I would say give it a shot, because you might be surprised what you find.
Yeah, I think anyone, whether they decide to like experiment with their overall sleep pattern, will find themselves in a position where like they know they're just not going to get what they think they need. And if they can just try to open their mind a little bit in that time and just assure themselves and tell themselves just some positive suggestions like, I'm going to get full rest in this period that I have, and might be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
Worth a try for sure.
2 periods, 3 hours each.
Is that the one that stuck out to you?
I think that's the most extreme one. I haven't even tried that.
I know. I want to try it though. Huh.
Yeah, if you want to cheat, you can do 5 hours and then take a 2-hour nap.
So many combinations. I definitely did the 5 and the 2, and that's more of where I'm at usually during my work week.
That one seems more reasonable.
Yeah. Huh. All right.
All right, see you next time.
Good talk.
That's our show, but fear not, the never-ending conversation continues next week. If you're enjoying the show, please be so kind as to subscribe, like, rate, and review, and if you're feeling frisky, tell a friend. Contact us at implicatingthereal@gmail.com. You can support the show at patreon.com/implicatingthereal. We are doing our best, but whatever support you can lend helps us appreciably. We are not affiliated with the publishers or proprietors, but we encourage you to get the books. You can follow along as we endeavor to dive deep into the Sethian worldview, and there's really nothing like cultivating your own relationship with the material. Until next week, we wish you a fun good evening.